circle back to this idea of ethics and integrity and doing things the right way, and I think that's an important ethos. But can you sort of contrast that ethos with also being a hustler and trying to get things done, and where is that line in the sand?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, and this, by the way, this is one of the reasons I like studying liberal arts, is because I think you get a chance to like monkey around with philosophy and ethics, and you get to test some of these questions, right? And I think those are always still fun books to read and debates to get into with your friends. You know, I think you look at downstream impacts of stuff, and so there's, you know, for those of you who didn't go to class as much, you're like, who's harmed by that, right? So, you know, but for those of you who are like stealing or preying upon, you know, someone who's impoverished or tricking them into borrowing money they can't afford or something like that, like, you should feel ashamed of that. And so, you know, there are rules that are there, like the taxi cab protection rules are just complete bullshit, right? They are built by a cartel who is self-serving, and they have bought off politicians. So consumers don't benefit from those rules. Like, you know, if you're in a black neighborhood in this country, you cannot get picked up in a cab. Like, if you're a black man standing in, like, you know, at Madison Avenue in the heart of New York City, you are not going to get picked up in a cab, right? And so, and yet they have completely entrenched protection for this system. They're not available when it's raining, like, and so you're just like, shit, this is when I actually need a cab, right? And so it was all built to, you know, these are rules that have no real foundational ethic behind them at all. And so along comes Uber and is like, look, the Uber system doesn't know if you're white or black or a man or a woman. They just need to pick you up. And if drivers turn down too many rides in a row, then they're kicked off the system, right? So anywhere in the city you request a ride, you're going to get a ride. You have to, like, or that driver is no longer eligible for the system. You know, obviously I just said the behavior on the system is a lot better. Like, when it's raining, the Uber drivers are out there because the price starts to surge and there's a market there. Like, so it starts asking you, how badly do you need a ride? You know, like, are you willing to pay double? But at least you know, like, if you desperately need a ride, there's going to be a car there. And so this market has actually solved this problem that has gotten past some of these crazy laws, but the laws behind them had no public purpose, right? We see that Uber, every city that launches Uber has a dramatic decline in drunk driving because the cars are available, they're easy, they're safe. Like, so you're like, well, I've had a few drinks instead of driving, I should take this home now. Or you just start your night in an Uber now because you're just like, I know I'm going to go out and have a bottle of wine. I won't drive anymore. And so, like, there's so much public benefit that you don't feel bad about breaking those rules, right? And so I think there's some real opportunity there to kind of ask yourself, like, is this a rule that is there because it serves a politician or an entrenched interest, you know, or a lobbyist who bought off our government here? Or is this a rule that actually protects a group of people who wouldn't be protected otherwise, right? So, you know, one of the things that Uber has had to develop recently is the original Uber platform didn't have options for handicapped riders, really. And so there weren't, like, wheelchair accessible vans in the Uber platform, right? But there are laws about that, and there's good laws for a reason. Like, people who are riding wheelchairs should be able to call cabs like anybody else, and they should be able to call Ubers like anybody else. And so Uber is evolving its business to provide those kinds of services in all its territory. That's important, right? And that's a rule that behind it is some purpose you should feel good about, and so that should exist on the platform. And so I think, you know, knowing the nature of governments in so many of your cultures, and knowing how new some of those governments are, knowing how corrupt some of it can be in the officials you come across, you know, I think you will feel comfortable not playing by some of those rules sometimes. And I think other times you'll be like, this rule exists for a reason, because the people in the rural part of this country aren't going to be protected otherwise, right? The people who don't have a voice, the people who've never even registered to vote, or the people who, you know, in a country that where we don't have voting, et cetera, or the people who can't read aren't going to understand the impact this has on them. I mean, we go back to InVenture, doing the lending to the people in Kenya and Tanzania, and 5 more countries coming really soon in Africa. But, you know, traditionally lenders have tried to squeeze every dollar of profit out of the person they're lending to, right? But that's not actually good for the long-term health of the business. It's not good for a lender if you go broke, if you default. Not only might they lose that money on that existing transaction, but they're going to lose you as a long-term customer. The best business for a lender is to lend you only the amount of money that you can pay back, such that you had a good experience and you're going to come back again and borrow from them again, right? And so the very best borrower is somebody who borrows again and again and again for years and years and years. That's the best. And so if you can build a system where you know that they're actually capable of paying you back and they're not spending more than they should, then that's the healthiest business ever, right? And so, but you've seen that's never been the case. Like in the United States mortgage system, we had this crash in 2008 and 2009 because they're like, I'll loan you whatever the hell you want, right? And then I'll sell that loan to somebody else, and and the whole system came crashing down. It wasn't good for anybody. And so, Shivani's company can actually tell whether she can even tell whether you have like a long commute and whether you should probably have a bicycle, And so if you say like, hey, I want to borrow some money for a bicycle, she'd be like, that's a good investment for you. Like I can tell, like that will make you, you'll be able to pay that back. You'll be able to get to work faster, et cetera, and you'll be a better customer for me in the future, right? But if she's just out there trying to loan as much money as possible to people, it's just a really unhealthy business. And so I think there are opportunities for you to not apologize for being a capitalist, or not apologize for making money, but just think about what are the downstream effects of that business. And so I'm going to make a lot of money from Style Seat, but I'm also going to be very proud that this company, founded by a woman that serves mostly women, half of whom are black women, is empowering this entire generation of women to build and run and own their own businesses, to manage their own clientele, to not be beholden to a salon, to be able to take that business wherever they want to go. A lot of these women are just working out of their homes now. One of the things Style Seat is working on is helping some of these independent business women finance the cost of supplies for braids or weave, because that's expensive, right? And again, this is something I never knew, but you go to get that kind of treatment, that stuff costs money. Sometimes you have to get it from the customer ahead of time, go get it, because a lot of the women who are working out of their house don't have working capital to have those kind of supplies. So what if I knew that you were an incredibly successful stylist working out of your home, your customers kept coming back to you, and even though you're not rich, et cetera, I just know you're trustworthy. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to loan you the money to go out and buy those supplies, so that now you can just have a customer come in and pay you directly. They don't have to pay you ahead of time. I know you're going to be able to grow your business. I'm going to get paid on that, right? And I'm going to feel good about it. And I'm not going to apologize for making profit on it, because you're going to be grateful to me as someone, I've empowered you to grow your business. And I think you can use these principles across everything you do. I know a lot of you are too young to have kids already, but that I think is one of these things. Or a lot of you do?
Most of them.
3? I'm going to have 3 really soon. In a month, I'm going to have 3. I have 2 little ones now. We're going to have 3. I'm going to have 4, and I'm going to have 3 kids under 4 by the end of the month. Oh man. So
God bless Crystal.
Anyway, but I'm sure then specifically you're able to look through the lens of, would I be proud to tell my kids this is what I do for a living, right? Is this, am I proud, when they ask me, so how do we make this money? How did you become a boss? What do you do for a living? Even if they can't quite grasp yet, it is hard to explain to a 3-year-old what venture capital is. Although any of you follow me on Periscope see they do the morning stock report sometimes, so my kids get in my lap. I think it's really important for girls to have financial literacy, even if they don't become business women. I just want them to be able to speak that language. And so literally we check the stocks every morning, and they know the difference between red and green, and whether they're making money or losing money, and it's hilarious. A few hundred people tune in because it's just funny to see these cute little girls doing it. But I want to be able to tell them with pride how we made money. I want to be able to tell them with pride what we do for a living. Even if that's small. My wife quit her big advertising career, and now she's a book designer, and she designs scratch and sniff books for adults. She had a New York Times bestseller as a scratch and sniff wine book. So how to learn about wine by scratch and sniff, and it's hilarious. But I'm really proud of her, and our kids are really proud of her. They know mom makes books, right? They don't change the world, and they don't generate a ton of money or anything like that. But it's really, you gotta feel really proud to put something creative out in the world like that. And so I think across all of your enterprises, that should be something. I don't want to criticize anyone who works for Coca-Cola or something like that, because I realize there are amazing opportunities to get a job like that sometimes that can pull you up by your bootstraps and put you in a position later to be your own entrepreneur. But I am not the kind of person who could work at Coca-Cola knowing the effects that sugar have on kids right now, on obesity and the crisis that's coming, they lead to worse attendance, sugar leads to worse attendance in school, underachievement, stunts growth, all these things that we know. I actually think eventually sugar will be regulated as a drug, because we know how bad sugar is for us. So and so if my kids are like, hey, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I sell sugary sodas to kids in schools everywhere. Like that's not a job I could do. That would be hard for me to get up in the morning and get passionate about it. I have friends who work at those companies, and they're excited when they come up with a new beverage and a new angle for it and stuff like that. But I want to just be much prouder of what I do at the end of the day. And so, I don't know. All right, that was a 20-minute answer to one question.
Well, so I have a lot of questions up here that you guys all have submitted, but I think at this point in time, let's take
do some
Chris's
live-
lead
let's do
here.
some
Yeah,
live
why don't you
ones.
guys ask some questions and we'll go from there.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I've got a friend from South Africa actually who's watching.
Oh, cool.
She asked me to ask a question on her behalf.
Cool.
So she's in social finance,
Uh-huh.
social financing, and she said I should ask you, what businesses are you keen on investing in that you see are not being built?
Well, so that's my point is I probably don't know those businesses. I think you do,
Yeah.
right? And your friend in South Africa, and I think each of you do. Like oftentimes we get pitched these things where I didn't realize that was an issue. A week ago on Twitter, I posted this series of things I had said no to. Like Airbnb, that's a $20 billion company. I was one of the very first people to see Airbnb, and when I saw it, to see the pitch, it was a tiny company. They showed me, and I was like, I don't know, you guys, like this sounds dangerous to me. Like sleeping in somebody else's house while they're still there. I was like, I think somebody's gonna get murdered or something like that, And so I said no. I probably missed out on hundreds of millions of dollars as a result, and it was because I'd forgotten that. I'm ashamed by it, but I now embrace this. That at our heart, people are good. Like people are good. You just know this, right? Like, yes, there are criminals. Yes, there are bad people, but at scale, people want to do the good thing. And if you give them an opportunity to be good to each other, they almost always are. Now, if that opportunity is anonymous, they can be nasty, right? So you see comments on YouTube videos that are just nasty, right? Hiding behind a screen name. Twitter can get nasty sometimes, right? But you can see in certain communities when it's a face and like, oh, you're in my house, so you certainly know my identity, and I know your rating as an Airbnb user. It turns out people are really nice to each other. And so what's interesting is I missed out on lots of money. Recently, I was pitched another deal in a similar space where people were letting other folks use their houses. And the other people I was with who were getting pitched were like, no, that sounds like a bad idea. And I was like, I made that mistake once. And I asked the founders, and they said, 43% of the people who put their houses into this program say their house is cleaner when they get back than it was when they left it, right? And they say, and only 1% of the use cases have ever complained about something, wrong with the house or something like that. People are good, and so but we're often kind of blind to that, right? I said no to Dropbox, which is a $15 billion company, because I thought Google was going to crush them. I said no to Snapchat because I was like, wait, isn't that just how you send naked pictures to other people? And I just totally ignored the whole big market opportunity. And I didn't even ask my business partner, Matt, who was already using it for non-naked pictures. He was using it to follow news and to communicate. I didn't even stop to get out of my own bubble and ask about that. And so, there are these businesses that make things incredibly cheap. And I told you, I'm just not as sensitive to cost right now. I'm in a different station in my life where I don't pay attention to the price, but real people working for real dollars do. And I've lost touch with that a little. As much as I try and put myself in their shoes, I sometimes, and so I have to be more academic about it and be like, okay, what is, a working class person in the United States spend their money on? Where does it go? What are their anxieties? But, you as a founder are close to that. Here's a great example. Almost all of the people setting policy in this country right now have no student loans, right? So college in the United States is incredibly expensive. You borrow all this money to go, you can leave school with $100,000, but you don't have any student loans. And by the way, the rules around student loans in the United States is you can't declare bankruptcy. They never go away. They hang around you forever. And the interest rates are really high. Despite the fact that they're guaranteed by the federal government, the interest rates are incredibly high. And so they're very, very expensive. But the people who set policy, whether it's at Congress, whether it's in your companies, et cetera, they forget about student loans. It's just not, and so everybody in this country who's 21 to 35 has it front of mind because shit, it's like paying a mortgage for a house I don't own. right? But the people who actually, and so if you can come up with a crazy alternative to student loans, it's probably not on the radar of any of these other people, right? And so talk about social finance. So, yes, there are big banks that will loan you lots of money. They have many rules for loaning you money, but there's a lot of great finance power in us lending each other money, right? I mean, one of the most successful companies in the country now is called Lending Club, where, have you seen this in the United States? It's an interesting model. You go as a person and you pitch yourself like as a borrower, like here's who I am, here's the school I went to or the school I want to go to, here are my accomplishments. I was in the Boy Scouts, or I was a successful soccer player in my high school. I volunteer at my church, here are my references. Here's the thing, I need to borrow $3,000 for this community college. Will you back me? I'm willing to pay you 4% interest, which is much cheaper than a traditional student loan, but I'm going to pay you this kind of interest. And normal people can go make a loan, to help that, or even a portion of a loan, like a little bit of a loan to help that person get to school. You've seen this with Kickstarter, right? That was I was one of the first investors in Kickstarter. So Kickstarter has allowed you to now not have to raise lots and lots of venture capital and give up a piece of your company, but just say, here's a product I'm working on, and I built a prototype, or I can get to a prototype if you each chip in, and here's some benefit for you. I'll put your name on it or whatever. And so that's social finance as well, right? And that's amazing. It's revolutionized how this stuff happens. We're starting to see more and more crowdfunding of money for startups here, where you can angel invest even if you're not a person who has a ton of money. I'm worried about it. I think it'd be scary. I think there's a lot of money for everyday investors to potentially lose there. But it has traditionally been illegal for your friends, if they're not already rich, to put money into your startup in the United States. That's weird, right? So, I mean, they're the people who back you most. They're the people who know you most, whether you're capable of doing it. It'd be nice for them to be able to put $500 in your startup, but that's traditionally been illegal. So that got fixed recently, and so that's pretty amazing. But ultimately, the companies that are being founded are probably founded by people like you with very unique perspectives that people like me don't know about. And the most successful people like me are people who are willing to listen to people like you and try and put ourselves in your shoes and understand something that may not fix my problem. Like, there's 5 Uber for yachts, for big boats, right? Because venture capitalists love boats, right? And there's always an attempt at Uber for private jets, right? And they all fail, by the way, because it's not a good business. But venture capitalists, all like private jets, and so, but where the money is, where the big opportunity is in all of these businesses that you know about that I don't, right? Like when I met Shivani at InVenture, I'll tell you, this is a great humility story. I was at the TED conference. You guys, I'm sure, watch TED Talks and stuff. And it was dinner with a speaker night. And there were all these famous speakers that I wanted to meet and sit at their table. But I got stuck talking to somebody on the way to the dinner, and so I got stopped. And by the time I got there, all the speakers I admired, their tables were full. And I was so jealous, too. They were like, Dan Ariely, who writes these great statistical and social behavior books, was like telling a great story, and everyone's laughing. I'm like, oh, man, I wanted to be at that table. And so I'm looking for where to sit. And I told you, she's this small Indian woman, and she's sitting next to a flag. So Shivani Sharaya, and she's all alone at this table. And I'm like, oh, man, I'd be a jerk if I didn't go sit down there, right? But I had all this self-interest. I wanted to meet these famous people and talk to them. I'm like, okay, well, so I sit down. I'm like, hi, I'm Chris. What's your name? Shivani. Shivani, what do you do? The next thing I know, it's 2.5 hours later. I have not eaten any of the food that has been set down in front of me. Other people have come and gone from the table, and I may have turned and been like, hey, what's going on? Back to this conversation. I was so fascinated by what she was doing. I was so fascinated by the market she was addressing, what she was capable of doing with the software, how she taught herself to code, all of this hustle. And she'd never raised venture capital. She hadn't even been thinking about it. I would not have met her otherwise. And yet I was so drawn in by, this is a whole world I don't know anything about. I got back to my house that night. It was back when Ted was in Long Beach still. And I got to my LA house at 11:30 that night. And I kept my wife up for an hour and a half talking about this thing. And I was just like, you have no idea. Check it out. Blah, 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 blah. And it was just, I never would have known about that. I never would have known about that market. I learned, I've now read 6 books on M-Pesa, that I wouldn't have known anything really about, right? So yeah, go ahead.
Can I start by saying, before you came here, I was really scared. This billionaire is coming here, venture capitalist. As an entrepreneur, most times you don't get to meet people like you. So this has been an experience that You guys are not so bad after all.
Oh, thank you, man. Where are you from?
I'm from Zimbabwe.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So you mentioned that your wife was very influential in one of the decisions you made to invest in a company. Is this the kind of thing that you do a lot of the time, or are you quick to look at like logic and key performance indicators and stuff? We hear that investors actually invest in people, not ideas. Is that true? And how far do you take that?
Well, remember, so first of all, I don't make an investment decision without my wife. And so, because not listening to her has cost me a lot of money. Another, like Pinterest, Pinterest is a huge company now, right? I saw Pinterest, I had a woman working for me, a young woman, and I was like, bring me deals that you think I wouldn't, see. She brought me Pinterest. The founder reached out. I just published this in my tweets like last week. You can see the actual email he wrote me, Ben Silberman, being like, we really want to work with you as an investor. And I remember looking at it and be like, I don't know, man. I was like, a friend of mine, Sukhinder Singh, who's one of the best executives I worked with at Google, left Google to run a thing called Polyvore that was very similar to Pinterest. I'm like, if Sukhinder can't do it, if she can't do it, who can do it? And I'm like, I don't know, I don't really get it. It looks all jumbled the way it's designed and stuff like that. And so I passed, right? Like that cost me hundreds of millions of dollars. And like my wife was like, you passed? She's like, do you know how much shit I pin all the time? Those things have cost me. I will say that as much as I thought the Pinterest design was all jumbled, I later went on, I was meeting with this entrepreneur, he was really crazy. I was like, so what was your background? He's like, well, I was the first designer at Pinterest. I'm like, done. Okay, come work for me. I'm not gonna make that. Like, something about human beings that I don't know. And like, that looks jumbled to me. Like, do you know Pinterest? Like, I don't know, like, am I supposed to read across or down and up and kind of like, but obviously hundreds of millions of people do. So anyway, I was like, we gotta do some business. But as a seed stage investor, there aren't a lot of KPIs and stuff to invest in, right? There aren't like big financials, right? The person can put in the deck, like, here's what I think it could be worth. That's all mumbo jumbo, right? So you have very few indicators. As we talked about earlier, like, I hope you have a site up and going. I hope you have a prototype of your product. I hope you have a business I can try. I think that's important. Like with Uber, even though we didn't have a whole marketplace of cars, what we did was Garrett, the founder, one of the co-founders of Uber, just rented a car out with a driver from a fleet. So he had it, and he just made it so that his friends as well as some potential investors could just use it. So he gave the app to like 25 people. And sometimes you'd have to wait longer because you're like, oh man, my buddy's using it, taking it over this party or whatever. And by the way, it was a limo. It was pretty cheesy. So like you'd pull up with your friends, the limo pulls up. And so it was tangible, we could touch it, right? At that point, the revenue was like zero because he wasn't charging anyone to use it in the very beginning. The costs were high because he was renting somebody else's car, but he could tell a story about this is solving a real problem. The drivers love it, the riders love it. Jesus, people move in every country, in every city, people are paying taxis. And he also was able to tell a story, by the way, about how the market isn't just the taxi market, it grows the market. Once you use Uber a few times, you stop driving yourself. Right now we have a thing called Uber Pool, which is cheaper than public transportation. And so you stop buying a car. And so it's a bigger market than just the cab market. It actually changes transportation forever. So he's able to tell that story. But at the heart of it, I'm investing in Travis and Garrett and Ryan. There's a story I wrote up on my site about Travis and playing a Nintendo Wii tennis. The Nintendo Wii?
It's a great story.
You saw that story? Yeah. So Travis was staying at our house in Truckee over the holidays, and my dad was there, and my dad likes to play like Nintendo Wii. I got him one once, and he thought he's pretty good at the tennis thing. You guys played this game, like you swing the little racket around, or the little stick. And so he's like, Travis, let's play a game. Come on, so he challenges Travis. And I think it was New Year's Day. I think Travis was like a little like hungover, and so he's just sitting on our couch. He's like, okay, I'll play. And they go to play, and Travis is like barely playing, and yet he's still beating my dad. It's close, but he's beating my dad. And my dad's like, what the hell? And my dad's standing up and swinging like this. And so anyway, after a few games, Travis is like, hey, Mr. Sacca, I got to tell you, I got to be honest, I'm not left-handed. And so he takes it and puts it in his other hand, like that movie Princess Bride, right? Takes it and puts it in his other hand. And then my dad never scores a point again. And my dad is really pissed off. He's like, what is going on here? And Travis is like, well, Mr. Sacca, I'll show you something. And he uses it to navigate to the menu on the screen, and he shows the worldwide leaderboard, and Travis is number 2 in the world at Wii Tennis while running Uber. Like that is someone with a level of obsession and competitiveness that you aren't going to find, maybe only in the number 1 player, right? But that is an incredible type of personality to back. Like, Travis will never lose, right? He will out-hustle everybody. Like, that guy, despite the fact he's worth $5 and change billion on paper, he travels to the